stuck at home in quarantine. 5 o'clock, why not have a drink with me?
Good afternoon, happy Thursday. Hope you all are doing well today. Took a venture out to Costco midday today and continues to be mostly normal, although as I pulled into the parking lot there was a weird contradictory thing that happened that I still don't really know the cause of. So basically the two contradictions are there were all of these like just more free parking spaces than usual. So it felt like, oh, like it's not at all busy, like there's just literally all these spots right by the door like that never are. And there was a big line of people at the door, probably 20 deep, waiting to get in. Now the last couple of times that I've been to Costco, there was no line. This was, I went 2 weeks ago, I went 4 weeks ago, no line, you go right in, they hand you the little Clorox wipe as you go in, it's all very pleasant. So I went and got in the line, I'm like, oh, like I didn't really like allot as much time as now this might take now that I'm in this long line. But as soon as I got in line, suddenly just everybody, they let everybody in. And there was no waiting, I waited like 30 seconds in this line. And when I got in, it was like mostly empty. So like, did I get there when it just opened? Did they close midday? Was there a weird like wave situation where they were like not letting people in for 10 minutes and I just like happened to come at the end of that? I don't know, but otherwise everything was pretty normal. I will say that the meat section feels a little more intense than it used to. They have big signs up, and I read about this in the Times the other day, that they were doing this, but they're limiting you to just 3 total meat items per customer. 1 beef, 1 pork, 1 poultry. And they didn't have any like chicken breasts and chicken thighs, which we would normally get and freeze. They did have the rotisserie chickens, which they apparently sell like billions of across the country every day. But so that was the only weird thing there. I am, for those of you who were with me yesterday, excited to report I was able to get a pineapple for the low Costco price of just $2.99 at Costco for this bad boy. It's a nice Dole pineapple, PLU 4430. So excited for this, and now I have my pineapple fronds for my tiki drinks, so I am good to go and all set. Also excited that I cracked open and am trying now my dry vermouth that we made earlier in the week, and it's quite nice. It's quite nice. I'm just drinking it on an ice cube with a little wedge of orange there, and it tastes like wine. It's not very sweet, but it has some like spices there and points of interest. So this is really very nice. I think if I'm drinking it straight, I prefer my sweet vermouth recipe just straight, but this is totally refreshing and serviceable as a just straight little nice early evening beverage. Looks like we've got Tom Kelly in the chat, John Nichols. Hey John, how you been? Ben Levesque, how you doing, Ben? And so as promised when we were making the dry vermouth earlier in the week, we are going to make over the next few days some dry vermouth cocktails. And tonight we are making the most iconic, I guess you would say, cocktail of all time, the Martini. Now if I ask you to draw a Martini, you're going to draw a nice triangle of glass, maybe with a little olive sticking out of it, and there you have it. And that's basically become the international symbol for bar, right? Or for drink, or for cocktail. And so the dry Martini that everybody knows and loves is just what it's almost synonymous with cocktail, and for many years it was. For many years people were ordering martinis, but then specifying a drink that was totally different from the martini that you and I know, and it almost, ventured into like Kleenex territory, where like you want a tissue, you say Kleenex, it might not be Kleenex brand. Suddenly we're calling all mixed drinks martinis. Luckily we strayed away from that, and that was not an issue and no longer something that we compete with. But it is interesting that you can basically go into any bar in America and get a martini that you would like to your specifications with some strategic ordering. So that's something. So I'm excited for us to make a martini today. Looks like we've got Peg and Allison joining. How you doing, Mom? Good to see you, Allison. Hope everybody is doing well. Now, there are a handful of stories about where the martini was invented, who created it, who gets credit for it. The most common legends of the martini don't really stand up to strict scrutiny. And so we're not really able to put our finger on like the martini was created in this place or by this person or named even by this person. We can find like cocktail books where similar drinks first showed up. We can find cocktail books where they started calling it martini for the first time. But it's one of those just things that are lost to history in terms of the specifics of the genesis of the martini. Some say it was created in the California town of Martinez, and it got its name from there. Others claim that it was, from the vermouth brand Martini and Rosso. There's Martini Vermouth. And what's interesting about that is that seems to be not true because people were calling martinis in the United States earlier than that vermouth was really in the United States. So that doesn't quite match up. What's interesting, though, is there is an early 1900s French cocktail book which specified Martini Vermouth in their martini drink, and I wonder if that sort of gave the name some legs and wasn't the reason it's called the martini, but maybe gave it support to hold on to that name throughout time, which is an interesting theory. But what we do know is that in cocktail history, we have, in the 1700s, we have the punches, and they start making these individual serving size punches, and that evolves into suddenly we have cocktails. And so we've got spirit, we've got bitters, we've got some sweetener, we're diluting it with some water, we're drinking these cocktails, we've got the whiskey cocktail. Then we start to think about, what if we spice things up with citrus and different sweeteners like grenadine or orgeat, and sort of cocktails evolve in that way. But it's true that there's also this huge moment in cocktail history when suddenly we start using vermouth in our cocktails. And so if we go back to the 1800s, vermouth starts to sort of be around in bars and be drunk by people in the 1850s, 1860s a little bit. And people were being so experimental with cocktails in the 1800s, and things were, moving so fast that it was only a matter of time before people started mixing spirits with vermouth to make these vermouth cocktails. And in fact, the martini would become one of these experimentations, but it wasn't the first. The first vermouth cocktail that was really, really popular was the Manhattan. The Manhattan comes before the martini. We're talking about in the probably 1870s. The Manhattan, late 1870s, becomes really popular. Whiskey, sweet vermouth. People are drinking Manhattans, everybody's having a good time. Manhattans maintain their deliciousness to this day. And of course, with this very popular and delicious drink, suddenly we are, thank you for that shout out, Allison, Teacher Appreciation Week. Glad I'm teaching you some cocktail knowledge tonight. It was only a matter of time before people are saying like, all right, this Manhattan is good. What if we put some different spirits instead of the whiskey in our Manhattans? And in fact, the early martini recipes were basically just swapping in the gin. And so now we have gin, and very early on, the earliest recipes have them using it with Italian vermouth, which would be what you and I know as sweet vermouth, the red stuff. And so there's these recipes, and that became a popular drink, and it took on this name of an early name of it was actually called the Turf Club, for where one version of this was published and invented, but also it took on the name Martini, which was at this point sweet vermouth with gin, and then some sweetener in there, maybe some bitters. And that over time then became the more evolved martini that we know today. And the main turning point for that recipe is when they invented what they called the dry martini, which was, it's not the dry martini you and I know, which is like, don't give me any vermouth. It's a dry martini in the sense that it's using dry vermouth instead of sweet vermouth, which again is what we know about this today. Where was your pineapple grown? Most do not come from Hawaii anymore. That's a great question. Let's take a look. I'm not sure how I would figure that out. It has this little promotional tag from Disney and Pixar, but it's a Dole pineapple, but it doesn't seem to say... Oh, there we go. Product of Costa Rica. It's a Costa Rican pineapple. Very good question, Tom Kelly. Thank you for that. Did not know that most don't come from Hawaii anymore. So now they're making their martinis with dry vermouth, and we get the martini that you and I know and love today. Which brings us to the next question is, what ratio are we using for our martinis? If you go into a bar today, you might order a dry martini, and you mean no vermouth or just a little bit of vermouth. You might order a dirty martini. My sister Erin just joined. I know she loves her dirty martinis with the olive brine. And that is actually something that they would do very early on in the martini history, early in the last century. They'd be drinking dirty martinis with their olive brine. Olives were very popular garnishes throughout cocktail history, and so that is not apocryphal at all. And so, yeah, so we need that. We have a couple of considerations when we're going to make our martini, and I'm going to show you in a moment how I make my perfect martini. So we need to know our ratios, how much gin to vermouth. My feeling on the matter is that you can have your preferred ratio, be it 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1, 5 to 1, 6 to 1. But when you get to the point where you are putting like a little drop of vermouth or no vermouth at all, I feel like at this point you just need to admit that you like cold gin, or you like cold gin with olive juice, and not really martinis, right? There has to be something that the name martini means, and I feel like that has to include a sizable, significant portion of the vermouth in your ratios. So we're going to be making a 3 to 1 ratio of gin to dry vermouth for our martini. I do have this, I have it as more of a novelty item, but this is called the Gigger, which is basically a play on the word jigger, and this has been mathematically designed in order to have the perfect, what they consider, the makers, the perfect ratio of gin to dry vermouth. So you put your gin in this big end here and pour it in, and then you put your dry vermouth in the other end there. And this is a 4 to 1 ratio, so we're not going to be using this, but I do kind of enjoy this as a novelty item. This, like, the Gigger, designed specifically to make, in their estimation, what the perfect ratio of the martini is. And then we have the garnish is the other decision. I think your two main options there are the olive, which has become super traditional. If you don't specify and you go into your average random bar on the street, you're probably getting an olive in it. I prefer the lemon peel, with the twist, give it a quick express, put it in there. Also classic, nobody will bat an eye if you order it that way, and that's my preference. It's not that I don't like olives, and in fact I want to eat an olive alongside my martini, but I don't want it in there. I want to really just, have the salty to the side. And in fact I have some olives here. I went down into our cellar, which is just our pantry in the basement, and found this bottle of these giant Chalkidiki olives, these Greek olives that I got at Trader Joe's, and they are huge. Look at this thing. Look how big that is. That's like the size of my nose. It's a huge olive. So I'm going to try one of those. But again, I'll eat it alongside my martini, and I think it'll be quite nice. And then the other thing that I think really accents the cocktail nice and will be like historically aligned to what martinis were drinking in the early 19th century is just a little bit, just a dash of orange bitters, which I think just bring just a little bit of essence, a little bit of interest into the mix. And I'm also just excited to see what my homemade dry vermouth brings into the picture here today. The other thing to keep in mind is that your martini ratios might change depending on the gin that you're using and the vermouth that you're using, right? If you have a more herbal vermouth or a quieter vermouth or a sweeter vermouth, that's going to change exactly the balance that you have in the drink. And in fact, I had a quote here that I thought was kind of funny about that, if I can find it real quick. This is from Bernard DeVoto in The Hour, which I don't know what that is, maybe a novel or something from 1946. And he says, "There's a point at which the marriage of gin and vermouth is consummated. It varies a little with the constituents, but for a gin of 94.4 proof and a harmonious vermouth, it may be generalized at about 3.7 to 1. So that is, I think, just an example of how particular people are about their particular ratios for their martinis. And so if you're a bartender, tread lightly, make people what they want. I don't think this is something to be precious about with the recipe. Like I said, I will draw a line in the stand about having a significant enough amount of dry vermouth where it's more than just drinking gin straight. But drink what you want, drink what you like, find the ratio that you like, and hopefully we all do that. The other thing I'll say is when we're making this, our goal is to get this as cold. You want to get this cold. You want to get this cold, cold, cold. And so there's a couple of different factors to that too. Now our dry vermouth is from the refrigerator. Our gin is room temperature. You don't want these to be cold because you do want some of that coldness to come from dilution in the ice. That's another factor. You won't see water in your ingredients list for your cocktail, but it really is an important ingredient. And as you're chilling and as you're mixing and you're stirring, you are going to get some dilution in there, which also wakes and brightens up the drink and is an important ingredient in the cocktail. So what I've been doing is I've been chilling my mixing glass. I have some ice there. I'm also going to serve it in my coupe. I've got some ice in my coupe there. I'm going to get some new ice that we are going to make this martini with. So let me grab my ice tray right here, and I'm going to grab just a little. So I want some new, fresh, cold ice. I'm going to get rid of this ice that's been chilling my mixing glass. We're pulling out all the stops tonight. And it looks like we've got Alice in the chat. Hello, Alice. Good to see you. Hope you enjoy this making of a martini. So we're going to build the martini in our chilled, cold mixing glass. And then we're going to chill it by mixing it. So, like I said, I'm going to do just one small dash of orange bitters. Then I'm going to do 2 and, forgot my other little jigger. I'm going to do 2 1/4 ounces of gin. I'm using Beefeater gin here. Got some more gins on the way. We placed an order with our local liquor store. Should be here anytime now, but I don't think it's been delivered yet. So we've got 2 ounces and 1/4 ounce. Remember, we're doing a 3-to-1 ratio. And now I need 3/4 ounce of my dry vermouth. Lovely. All right. Now, put our ice in. And we're going to stir. The stirring is going to get it real cold, and it is going to dilute just as much as we want. I don't think I need to talk too much about James Bond in this moment. It's been clearly established that he's doing everything wrong when it comes to the martini. Nobody wants vodka. Nobody wants it shaken. A nice, clear, smooth cocktail. See the sides of my mixing glass getting nice and frosted up. It's because it was already chilled, and now it's getting extra cold. Toss the ice from my coupe. Also make a pitch for having your cocktails in nice coupes and not using those just disastrous V glasses, which I know again is like iconic for the symbol for bar and the symbol for cocktail, those V glasses. But they're just like, they spill all over the place. You can't cause any angle, they're a mess. I feel like these are much more elegant and nice, which I appreciate. I'm gonna take my julep strainer, strain it into my glass. I'm gonna keep even the pour nice and low to the coupe because I just stirred and spent all this time not putting any air bubbles or foam or anything in this that you would get from shaking. I stirred it and you get this nice, crystal clear, beautiful cocktail right there, the martini. And I'm gonna garnish with a nice lemon twist. So I've got my lemon here. I did re-up my citrus stocks at Costco with a big bag of lemons, big bag of limes. It's nice, fresh, good. You can smell at the end. So got a nice peel, no pith. I'm just gonna express the oils over the top, rub it along the outside, and drop it in. And there we have what is in my mind the ideal martini. Cheers. So you get that lemon scent right away from the garnish. It's nice and cold. It's ginny, but you're not just drinking gin. You get some interesting flavors from the good dried vermouth that we're using, which is my homemade Ryan Kelly house dried vermouth. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful marriage and wonderful pairing. You obviously have to like gin, but again, you're not just drinking straight gin here. Very nice. Now I'm gonna try one of these humongous olives. I don't know if I should eat this all in one bite. I'll try to, nice and salty. No, this is huge. Good though. Mm-hmm. Okay, way too good. Very nice olive. Again, get a little bit of saltiness there, and then we'll go back to the drink. See, has it changed? Even better. I don't want all that brine in there, but I do want some, interesting pairing my appetizers with my cocktail. Whew. So there we have it. Probably the most iconic cocktail you can have. One that has really stood the test of time. I think that's fair to say. And I think what's interesting about it is that it's not something like where I think like the best classic cocktail that meets the intersection of is like classic and iconic and everyone knows it and is pretty prevalent and has a really like set recipe would be the Negroni, right? Like that has to be, you've got to go Stanley Tucci aside, I won't get started on Stanley Tucci again. He's making more cocktail videos. Did you know this? Did you know this? He made a Scotch sour I saw. He's putting out all these cocktail videos. Don't get me started again on Stanley Tucci. The Negroni, back to my point, is 1 to 1 to 1, equal parts classic. You've just got to make it that way. You've got to use Campari, gin, sweet vermouth. That is the recipe for a Negroni. Martini, just as classic, but does not have such a set recipe. And so I'll leave you with that. You can do it 2 to 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1, 5 to 1, 6 to 1, whatever your preference is. You can have it with an olive or with lemon. But the only things I ask of you is if you are drinking a martini and calling it such, stir it for God's sakes. And have some dry vermouth so that you can taste the dry vermouth, so that it brings something. And don't call your cold glass of gin, which if you like drinking cold gin, then drink cold gin. I don't begrudge you that. Gin is a great spirit. Drink it nice and cold in your glass. But don't call it a martini if you are not using some dry vermouth that really changes the character of the cocktail. That's all I have to say now. Allison votes for bar snack pairing recommendations. Yeah, I think what's great about about whether you're just drinking some vermouth on its own or drinking a martini is you want something that is like a little bit salty. So right now I've got these olives. I've also got here a little cheese board. I've got a smoked Gouda and a Manchego. You know, something that's going to have a little bit of salt, a little bit of bite to it. We've got these miso crackers, which are also like these super salty but yummy crackers that have a ton of flavor. You know, when you're having a cocktail, you want to have some snacks that stand up to the cocktail and the spirits, right? So this is like this'll punch you in the face. The other thing I'll say about the evolution of us, like as people in the 1870s and 1880s were playing with their vermouth cocktails, they, in some ways, in the Manhattan and the Martini, were finding a middle ground between, like, early on they had this thing called a vermouth cocktail, which is basically a glass of vermouth with, like, some bitters in it, and it was like you're just drinking wine at that point. And then there are some other recipes where they are using, like, a couple of drops of vermouth in their cocktails, and that's, like, super boozy. What's nice about the Manhattan and the Martini is that they found this middle ground and this synergy between it being lighter than just like a straight up drinking spirit straight versus just like essentially drinking wine by drinking vermouth with like a hint of something else. So I think again this makes a nice thing of like this is gonna have some booze to it and you want a snack that holds up to that. That's all I have to say tonight. Cheers to the martini. I hope you all are having your own cocktails or drinks or whatever makes you happy.
It's 5 o'clock. Why not have a drink with me?
Also, that reminded me of, I want to give a shout out to my great friend Zach, who made our wonderful intro and outro music and stirring music. Zach, it was announced today, he's been working on this project, but he's officially doing the music for a new Xbox video game that involves dinosaurs. And anyway, he's been working on this, but he hasn't been able to talk about it in the past because it was still kind of hush-hush, but it was officially announced at the Xbox Live event that happened today. So congrats on the new project, Zach, and cheers everyone else. Have a great night.